About March last year, 2024, my team and I had an opportunity to partner with the Diocese of Chinchizi in the Kanungu district to train pastors and do outreaches in schools in remembrance of what happened in Kanungu in the year 2000 on March 17th. Part of our training had to do with equipping pastors to recognize cults and know how to respond to them, creating mass awareness in schools all over the diocese that students may be aware of the danger that cultic groups pose, may know how to identify them, and especially grow in their faith to know how to respond when cultic recruiters come in their schools. As part of our visit to the Diocese of Chinchizi, we had an opportunity to visit the Kanungu site. We did climb the hill where their headquarters used to be. And what struck me was the forsakenness of the place. The overgrown grass, the crumbling buildings, the mass holes where they dug up different people that had been killed at the time. The silence was much louder than you can imagine. We had more questions than answers. My concern was not even that Kanungu happened. My concern was, has the church in Uganda learned anything from what happened in Kanungu? How do you wake up to the death of over 500 people in a fire, more hundreds of people buried in different mass graves across the country, and nobody asks questions? Among those people were innocent followers who thought they had found the way of truth at last. I can imagine there were women who, out of submission to their husbands, had followed them into the group. I can imagine there were many young people, children, who had no choice in the decision making, but ended up in Kanungu because their parents went there. Of course, as you can imagine, there were also cult leaders who knew what they were doing and did it anyway, to the loss of over 1,000 people. But how did they end up in this place in the first place? We are told that this movement that is called the Movement for the Restoration of the Ten Commandments had begun under the leadership of men like Joseph Chibwetere, Father Kataribabo, and Credonia Mwerinde, who claimed that the world was coming to an end in the year 2000 and recruited as many people as they could, not just from around Kanungu, but around the country, even within the surrounding countries in East Africa, and brought them to Kanungu, set them apart from the rest of the world, claimed that they were purifying them and preparing them for the time when the Virgin Mary would come and pick them. Now, if you listen to that story, even though given in summary, you can already see some danger signals. First and foremost, here is a group that is claiming that they know the end of the world. And as you and I know, if you're a good Bible reader, Jesus said, no one knows, not even the angels. The Father in his wisdom has kept that day hidden from all of us. Our job is not to predict the end. Our job is to watch and wait for the return of Christ. You will also notice that this was a movement built on what we would call extra-biblical revelation. Here is a group of leaders who are claiming that apart from the Bible, away from the Bible, above and beyond the Bible, God had given them a message that only they knew, with no means to verify it, by the way, because it's not in the Bible. And on the basis of this so-called revelation, hundreds gathered, believed in the movement and its ideology, believed in the autocratic leadership of this small group, and hoped they were on their way to heaven. As our brother Ruben has been sharing, lots of warnings. Beware of people who tell you that they have a revelation that no one else knows, especially a revelation that cannot be substantiated from scripture or even vindicated by the consistent testimony of the Bible. Be careful of people who claim that they know when Jesus is returning or when the world is coming to an end, because all those are danger signals. You may also notice that they didn't claim that Jesus was coming to pick the selected ones at the time of the end, but it was instead the Virgin Mary who was coming to pick them. Now, any Bible reader would have had reason to worry and wonder, why is it the Virgin Mary coming to pick people to go to heaven? Why is it not Jesus who died and rose again for them? But apparently, there was very little discernment among the followers. No one dared question the group or even reason from the scriptures as to why they were receiving contradicting messages from the Bible. For so many reasons that I'm not able to mention now because of time, hundreds believed in the group and its ideology, and to their end, they perished. Now, what is even more concerning, 25 years down the road, where does the church stand today? Could we, together with confidence, say that the church in Uganda is now more ready to identify, to understand, and answer questions surrounding the world of cults today? How would we describe the structures within our churches today in terms of how leaders are equipping their members to identify these cults and how they are growing them in their confidence of the Christian faith to be able to respond to the challenges posed by these cults? As Ugandan church members, how ready are we to interact with people who are involved in these groups and be able to show them what the Bible teaches in ways that are convincing and winsome? Many of us, even as we sit here, I am sure we have loved ones who are already going into questionable religious sects and groups, and some of them even in more aggressive and dangerous groups that potentially can harm them, break their marriages, or even lead them to death. But do we have the capacity, the ability to evangelize these loved ones out of these cults, or to counsel those ones who are on the crossroads? And if we cannot say yes to these questions, then it makes you wonder, has the church in Uganda really learned from the Kanungu tragedy on how to avoid a repeat of this? But even more importantly, how to help the church members grow in discernment that they do not become vulnerable to the challenge of cults anymore. Our research as the Africa Center for Apologetics Research, on several occasions as we have interacted with different churches and different denominations in the country, continues to reveal that the church is not ready to face the challenge of cults. In most cases, that church leaders themselves remain under-equipped, remain under-trained, lack the tools and resources to respond to this challenge. And if church leaders are not prepared, then obviously they are not preparing their members to do the same. But their members continue to live in communities where there are cultic churches, cultic groups, cultic ideologies, and it makes you wonder, how are these churches evangelizing their communities, especially where cults are? How are these churches counseling people who are coming out of cultic groups, remembering that out of a cult does not necessarily mean into the truth? What about the plight of those who have been used and abused by cultic groups and feel desperate and disillusioned, have lost hope in Christianity as a worldview and a faith? Who is helping them rediscover the path to truth, to recognize the errors they made while they were in this cultic group, and how they can ensure that they never fall into another one? Are you aware that there are some people who run out of one cultic group only to join a much more dangerous one, thinking that they are now much better or safer than they used to be? Is there anyone in our churches who is prepared or who has been prepared to conduct what I would call cult counseling, helping people who are coming out of cults to stand firm in the truth of the Christian faith and to help their loved ones around them who are just as broken as them? When these questions lack answers, we are left wondering, is it possible that the church in Uganda is sitting on a time bomb that one day could explode? Is it possible that we could have a much more serious than Kanungu any time today, as we continue to see new questionable, controversial religious groups mushroom in the country with no accountability, with nobody able to discern whether they stand in line with the fundamentals and teaching or not? I speak with a broken heart and with great concern. And I keep wondering, how can we as Christian leaders in the country sit together and develop a theological or doctrinal think tank that can help us, first and foremost, identify the fundamentals that bind us together as the Christian church in Uganda, but even more importantly, design structures in which we can help people who are victims of cults, in which we can create mass awareness so that we prevent these false teachers and their teachings from coming in our churches in the first place. It is very easy for us to keep responding to things that have already fallen apart. But is it possible that we can actually set up a preventive approach in which churches can come together, leaders can be trained, members can be inoculated against false teaching so that they can smell the danger from afar and be able to guard themselves from the danger and warn others who are potential recruits? As we are here in this public seminar, it is my cry and clarion call that one takeaway for us today would be a commitment to stand together as a church, to ground ourselves in truth, to guide and guard our members and our churches from the danger of cults, and more importantly, to train and equip our members to make a defense for the faith that was once for all delivered to the saints. Kanungu still cries out to us, and it still says it's not over yet. And unless the church stands and makes a commitment, we are in more danger than we can ever imagine.